She was working the late shift at the gas station Café, until the billionaire saw a photo of his late wife in her locket, and he froze. The Nevada desert had a way of swallowing sound whole. At 3 a.m, the only things cutting through the silence were the hum of the fluorescent lights outside the gas station and the occasional 18-wheeler barreling down the highway, its engine roar fading into nothing within seconds. Emily Dawson wiped down the same table for the 3rd time. Her movements automatic. The graveyard shift at Rick's stop and go wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Barely. At 25, she'd gotten used to exhaustion settling into her bones like an old friend. Coffee-stained apron, hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under eyes that used to be brighter. Her nursing textbook lay open on the counter, pages dog-eared and highlighted within an inch of their life. Pharmacology. She had an exam in 6 days. Just gotta pass this one, she muttered to herself, flipping a page. Then it's clinical rotations, then what? A better life. She'd been chasing that carrot for years now. The silver medallion around her neck caught the overhead light as she moved. She touched it without thinking, a habit she'd had since childhood. The metal was warm against her fingertips, worn smooth from decades of being held, worried over, loved. Inside was a photograph so faded it was almost ghostly. A woman with kind eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Emily had memorized every detail of that face, searching for pieces of herself and features she'd never actually seen in person. Her mother, dead before Emily ever got the chance to know her. Died in childbirth, Grandma Evelyn used to say, her voice always getting quiet. Like speaking too loud about it might wake something sleeping. Bringing you into this world took her out of it, baby. But she loved you. Don't you ever forget that? Emily tried not to think about it too much. What good did it do? Mourning someone you'd never met. But late nights like this, when the desert felt endless and her future felt impossible, she'd catch herself staring at that photograph, wondering what her mom's voice sounded like, if she would have been proud of Emily grinding through nursing school, if she would have understood what it felt like to be this tired, this alone. The bells above the door chimed. Emily looked up, expecting the usual suspects. Truckers needing coffee, insomniacs looking for cigarettes, maybe someone lost asking for directions. What she got instead was a goddamn Rolls Royce. It pulled up to the pump like it had taken a wrong turn somewhere between Monaco and reality. Sleek, black, the kind of expensive that made Emily's beat-up Honda Civic look like it belonged in a junkyard. She watched through the window as a man stepped out, mid-40s maybe, tailored suit that probably cost more than her rent for a year, dark hair with distinguished gray at the temples, the kind of handsome that came with old money, sharp jawline, straight posture, expensive watch catching the light. But there was something off about him. His eyes looked haunted, like he was carrying around a weight that no amount of money could lift. He walked into the diner section like he owned the place, but also like he wasn't really seeing it, lost in his own head. Evening, Emily said, grabbing a menu out of habit. Or morning, I guess. Coffee. Please. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a while. She poured him a cup, black, and set it down. He didn't touch it, just stared at it like the answers to life's mysteries might be floating in there somewhere. Rich people were weird. Emily went back to her textbook, giving him space. But she could feel him watching her, not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure something out. She'd gotten pretty good at reading people during her years at the diner. Truckers who wanted to talk your ear off, businessmen who treated you like furniture, lost souls looking for something they couldn't name. This guy, he was all three wrapped into one expensive package. She moved to refill his cup even though he hadn't touched it yet. Customer service on autopilot. That's when it happened. The chain slipped. The medallion tumbled out from under her uniform, catching the light, spinning like a tiny pendulum before settling against her apron. The sound of shattering porcelain made her jump. The coffee cup had slipped from the man's hands. Literally slipped, like his fingers had just stopped working. It lay in pieces on the floor, coffee spreading across the tile in a dark puddle. But he wasn't looking at the mess. He was staring at her necklace like he'd seen a ghost. No, like he was seeing a ghost. His face had gone absolutely white. His hand shook as he reached forward, stopping just short of touching the medallion. "Where did you get that?" Emily took a step back, suddenly very aware that they were alone in the diner, and this guy looked unhinged. It's just a necklace. I'll get something to clean up the... Where did you get it? His voice cracked, desperate. Please, I need to know. It was my mom's. Okay, Jesus, what's your problem? He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Emily's hand moved toward the baseball bat she kept behind the counter. Rick had told her to use it if things ever got weird. This was definitely getting weird. But the man wasn't moving toward her. He was just standing there, staring at the medallion like it had reached up and slapped him across the face. His eyes were doing something she couldn't quite read. Pain, shock, hope, disbelief, all of it crashing together. Your mother, he said slowly. What was her name? I never knew her. She died when I was born. The words came out harder than she meant them to. Look, I don't know what kind of game this is. Can I see it? The picture inside? Every instinct told Emily to say no, to kick this weirdo out and call the cops. But something in his voice stopped her. The raw grief in it. The way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. Against her better judgment, she opened the medallion, showed him the faded photograph. He made a sound, somewhere between a sob and a gasp. His knees actually buckled. He caught himself on the table, but barely. Grace, he whispered. Oh my God, Grace. How do you know? I need to know everything. He looked up at her, and his eyes were wet. Your grandmother. Is she still alive? Where did she get this? When were you born? Please. He stopped, seemed to realize how crazy he sounded. Took a breath. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. My name is Richard Hale, and I think... Another breath. Shaky. I think I might be your father. The words hung in the air like smoke. Emily felt the world tilt sideways. You need to leave. Please. Now. He pulled out a business card with trembling hands, set it on the counter. This is my number, my personal number. When you're ready to talk, if you're ever ready, please call me. I can explain everything. He walked out without another word. The Rolls-Royce pulled away, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Emily stood there for a long time, staring at the business card. Richard Hale, CEO, Hale Pharmaceuticals, a Boston address. She picked up the medallion, looked at her mother's face, a face she'd never questioned before. But now, standing in the fluorescent glow of a desert gas station at 3 a.m, she wondered if everything she'd ever been told about her life was a lie. Outside, the desert stretched on forever, keeping its secrets. 26 years earlier, Boston, Massachusetts, spring 1998. Richard Hale had never believed in love at first sight until he walked into Bennett's flower shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. He ducked in to escape a downpour, his $1,000 suit already soaked through. And there she was, Grace Bennett, arranging tulips with the kind of focus artists gave to their masterpieces, dark hair falling over her shoulder, humming something soft under her breath. When she looked up and smiled, it felt like the sun coming out. Rough morning? She asked, and her voice was warm honey, getting better by the second. She laughed, actually laughed, not the polite, practiced laugh he was used to from women at charity galas. Real, unguarded. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the third week, he wasn't even pretending to need flowers anymore. Your apartment must look like a botanical garden by now, Grace teased, wrapping another bouquet. I give them to my secretary. She thinks I'm the most thoughtful boss in Boston. And what's the real reason you keep coming back? He met her eyes. I think you know. They started meeting in secret. Coffee shops in neighborhoods where no one knew the Hale name. Late-night walks along the Charles River. Stolen kisses in the back room of her flower shop, surrounded by roses and baby's breath. Richard had never felt more alive, or more terrified. His mother, Margaret Hale, ruled the family with an iron fist wrapped in pearls and old money. The Hales didn't date florists. They dated congressmen's daughters, heirs to fortunes, women who understood that marriage was a merger, not a romance. We'll tell her eventually, Richard promised Grace one night, holding her close in his tiny apartment, the one he kept secret from his mother, the one place he could just be Richard, not the Hale heir. When the time is right, and when will that be? Grace asked softly. He didn't have an answer, but then Grace got pregnant. She told him on a Sunday morning in July, sitting on his couch with the test in her hands, terrified and hopeful all at once. "I know this isn't how we planned." Richard kissed her. "Marry me. Richard, I mean it. We'll elope. Tell my mother after. She can't control everything." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They planned it for 3 weeks out. A simple ceremony at City Hall. Nothing fancy, just them and their future. Richard had never felt happier or more scared. But love was supposed to be scary, right? That meant it mattered. He should have known his mother would find out. Margaret Hale sat in her study in the Beacon Hill mansion. The private investigator's report spread across her mahogany desk. Photographs of Richard and the florist, records of the apartment he was renting, and the final nail, medical records obtained through less than legal means, pregnant. That common little girl was pregnant with a Hale. Margaret's jaw clenched. Not on her watch. She made 3 phone calls that evening. By morning, the machinery of destruction was already in motion. 1 week before the wedding, Grace was closing up the flower shop when the van pulled up. 2 men, professional, efficient. They had her unconscious, and inside within 30 seconds. By the time anyone noticed she was missing, the van was already on I-95 heading north. Richard got the call at midnight. Grace's friend, hysterical. She hadn't shown up for their dinner plans, wasn't answering her phone. The flower shop was locked, but her purse was still inside. He tore through Boston looking for her, called hospitals, police stations, anyone who would listen. Her car was found 3 days later at the bottom of a ravine off Route 2. Completely destroyed, no body recovered. The police said the river could have carried it miles downstream, but Richard knew, somehow, deep in his gut. He knew. His mother had done something. He confronted her in her study, wild-eyed and grief-stricken. "What did you do?" Margaret didn't even look up from her paperwork. "I don't know what you're talking about. Grace is dead. Her car." "Yes, I heard. Tragic accident. These winding roads can be so dangerous." The way she said it, so calm, so controlled. "You killed her." His voice broke. "You killed her and our..." He couldn't even say it. Couldn't say baby out loud, because then it would be real. Then he'd have to face what he'd lost. Margaret finally looked at him. Her eyes were ice. "That girl was going to destroy everything we've built. Everything your father worked for. Did you really think I'd let some nobody dilute the Hale bloodline?" Richard wanted to hit her, to scream, to burn the whole goddamn mansion down. But he just stood there, broken. "You're a monster. I'm a mother, protecting her son from a mistake that would have ruined his life." She returned to her papers. "In time, you'll thank me." But time only made it worse. Present day, Boston. Richard sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city, the business card still in his pocket from the gas station. 26 years of walking through life like a ghost. He'd married Clara Reynolds 5 years after Grace disappeared, a marriage arranged by his mother, loveless and hollow. Clara was beautiful, polished, everything a Hale wife should be, and Richard felt absolutely nothing for her. How could he? His heart had died in that ravine with Grace, except Grace might not be dead. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. The private investigation firm he'd used before picked up on the second ring. "This is Richard Hale. I need you to find someone. Everything. Birth records, adoption papers, DNA analysis, medical history. I don't care what it costs." He gave them Emily's information, the gas station location, everything he could remember. "And I need it yesterday." His assistant knocked. "Mr. Hale, your wife is online too." "Clara, right?" He'd forgotten they had dinner plans. He picked up. "Clara, I need to cancel tonight." Again, her voice was tired. Not angry, just tired. "Richard, what's going on?" "It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated." A pause. "Is this about a woman?" He almost laughed. "Yes, but not the way you think. I stopped trying to think years ago." She sighed. "We should talk. Really talk. Not whatever this is. I know soon, I promise." After he hung up, Richard walked to the window. Boston sprawled below him, a city full of secrets, money, and lies wrapped in historic brownstones. His mother's mansion sat across town, imposing and cold. She was 78 now, confined to a wheelchair after a stroke last year, but even weakened, Margaret Hale was still the most dangerous person he knew, if Emily really was his daughter. And God, everything in him said she was. Then that meant Grace had been pregnant when she disappeared, which meant his mother had known, had targeted her specifically because of the baby. Had she killed them both, or something worse? Richard's phone buzzed. A text from the investigation firm. Initial search confirms Emily Dawson, age 25, raised by Evelyn Dawson in Nevada, arranging expedited DNA testing, will have preliminary results in 48 hours. 48 hours to find out if his entire life had been built on a lie. Richard looked at his reflection in the window. Expensive suit, graying hair, eyes that had stopped showing emotion years ago. The successful businessman, the dutiful son, the empty husband. What would he become if Emily was his daughter? If Grace had been alive somewhere all these years? Hope was a dangerous thing. It made you believe in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that broken things could be pieced back together. Richard hadn't let himself hope in 26 years, but standing there, watching the sun set over Boston, he felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked away since the day they told him Grace was dead. Maybe, just maybe, not everything was lost after all. Emily hadn't slept in 2 days. She kept the business card on her nightstand, staring at it like it might spontaneously combust. Richard Hale, CO, Boston. The words swam in her vision every time exhaustion tried to pull her under. I think I might be your father. Crazy. The whole thing was crazy. Rich guy shows up, sees a necklace, has a breakdown, and suddenly she's supposed to believe her entire life was a lie. But something about the way he'd looked at the medallion, the raw, unfiltered grief in his eyes, kept her from throwing the card away. You okay, baby? Emily looked up. Grandma Evelyn stood in the doorway of her tiny bedroom, concern etched into every line of her weathered face. At 68, Evelyn Dawson was all sharp angles and soft eyes, a woman who'd raised a granddaughter on minimum wage and sheer stubbornness. I'm fine, Grandma. You're a terrible liar. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her weight making the old springs creak. You've been staring at that card for hours. Who is he? Emily's throat tightened. Some guy who came into the diner. He saw Mom's necklace and freaked out. Said he knew her. The color drained from Evelyn's face. What? He asked where I got it. When I was born, he seemed... Emily's voice cracked. Grandma, he said he thinks he's my father. Evelyn stood up so fast she nearly fell. Her hand flew to her chest. No, Emily, you can't... Can't what? Something cold settled in Emily's stomach. Grandma, what aren't you telling me? Nothing. It's nothing. That man is confused, or he's trying to scam you, or he drives a Rolls Royce. I don't think he needs to scam waitresses. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Actually shaking. Emily had seen her grandmother face down bill collectors, handle 3 jobs at once, survive cancer treatments without flinching. She never shook. Grandma, leave it alone, Emily, please, just throw that card away and forget this ever happened. How can I forget? He recognized Mom's picture. He's mistaken. Then why are you so scared? Emily stood up, her exhaustion giving way to something sharper. You've told me my whole life that Mom died giving birth to me, that you don't know who my father was, that she was alone. But now some stranger shows up and you're acting like the world's about to end. So I'll ask you again, what aren't you telling me? Evelyn's face crumpled. She sank back onto the bed, suddenly looking every one of her 68 years. I was trying to protect you. Emily's heart hammered. From what? For a long moment, Evelyn just sat there, tears streaming down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Your mother didn't die in childbirth. The world tilted. What? I lied. I've been lying for 25 years. Evelyn's shoulders shook. But I didn't know what else to do. I was so scared, and you were just a baby, and... Tell me. Emily's voice came out flat, hard. Tell me everything, right now. 25 years earlier, Nevada Evelyn had been a widow for 3 years, working 2 jobs just to keep her trailer. When someone knocked on her door at 2 a.m, a woman stood there, older, elegant, the kind of wealthy that made Evelyn's second-hand nightgown feel like rags. Behind her, a black car idled in the driveway. In the woman's arms was a newborn baby, wrapped in a blanket that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent. "You're Evelyn Dawson?" the woman asked. Yes. Your daughter died in childbirth 2 days ago in a Boston hospital. This is her child." The woman thrust the baby forward. "The father is unknown and irrelevant. You're the only family." Evelyn's mind reeled. "My daughter. I don't have a—" "Your daughter, Sarah Dawson, who ran away from home 7 years ago." The woman's voice was ice. "Surely you remember." But Evelyn had never had a daughter. She'd never been able to have children. That's what the doctors had told her 20 years ago. This was insane. The baby started crying. "The birth certificate lists you as next of kin," the woman continued, pulling out documents. "Everything is in order. Legal, the hospital has been paid, there are no complications. You take the child or she goes into the system." Something in the woman's eyes made Evelyn's blood run cold. This wasn't a good Samaritan. This was a threat. "Why are you really here?" Evelyn whispered. The woman leaned in close. "Because if you ask questions, if you try to dig into where this baby came from, if you ever try to find out the truth, I will make your life disappear. Do you understand me? You're poor, alone, nobody. I can make you vanish like you never existed." Evelyn's hands trembled as she took the baby. The infant was so small, so helpless. "There's one more thing." The woman pulled out a silver medallion. This was the mother's. The child should have it. Then she was gone. The black car disappearing into the Nevada night. Evelyn stood in her doorway, holding a baby that wasn't supposed to exist, with paperwork that said her non-existent daughter had just died. She should have called the police, should have fought it. But that woman's eyes, cold, powerful, absolutely certain, told her that fighting would get them both killed. So Evelyn kept the baby, kept the secret, and told herself she was doing the right thing. Present day. "Her name was Margaret," Evelyn whispered. "That's all I knew. She never told me why. Never explained where you really came from. But the paperwork was perfect. Birth certificate. Death certificate for Sarah Dawson. Everything. I tried to find out more, but every time I asked questions, strange things started happening. My car was vandalized. I got threatening calls. Someone broke into the trailer but didn't steal anything. Just left everything a mess. Like a warning." Emily couldn't breathe. "So you just kept me, lied to me for 25 years. What was I supposed to do?" Evelyn's voice broke. "Tell a 5-year-old that I didn't know where she came from, that some scary rich woman dumped her on my doorstep with threats. You were innocent. You deserved a childhood that wasn't terrified. I deserved the truth. The truth would have gotten us killed." Evelyn grabbed Emily's hands. "That woman had power, baby. Real power. The kind that makes people disappear. I did what I had to do to keep you safe." Emily pulled away, her mind racing. Margaret, a rich woman from Boston who could forge documents and terrorize people into silence. Richard Hale, CEO from Boston, looking at her mother's picture like he'd seen a ghost. "Call him," Evelyn said quietly. "What?" "That man. Richard Hale. Call him." Evelyn's face was pale, but determined. "If he knew your real mother, if he's really your father, maybe he can tell us who Margaret was. Maybe we can finally know the truth. You just spent 25 years hiding from the truth. And I'm tired. Emily, I'm so tired." Evelyn's tears started again. "I've been looking over my shoulder for a quarter century, terrified that woman would come back. Maybe it's time to stop running." Emily looked at the business card. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Richard Hale answered on the first ring. "Hello? It's Emily from the diner." She took a breath. "You said you could explain everything." "Yes." His voice was thick with emotion. "God, yes." "Then explain. Because my grandmother just told me that everything I thought I knew about my life is a lie, and you're somehow at the center of it." There was a pause. Then, "Can we meet in person? I'm already on my way to Nevada. I'll be there by tomorrow morning." "You're flying here. I chartered a plane the day after I met you. I've been waiting for you to call." Another pause. "Emily, I have investigators working on this, and I think I think we need to take a DNA test, both of us. Her stomach dropped. You're serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. His voice cracked. Please just give me a chance to explain face to face. After that, if you want me to disappear, I will. But you deserve to know the truth about who you are. Emily closed her eyes, felt the medallion against her chest, the one constant in her life, now revealed to be part of some massive lie. Okay, she whispered. Tomorrow morning, the diner. Thank you, Emily. Thank you. She hung up and looked at Evelyn, who sat on the bed crying silently. We're going to find out the truth, Emily said. All of it. No more secrets. Evelyn nodded, and for the first time in 25 years, she looked relieved. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the stars, still keeping secrets, but maybe not for much longer. The DNA results came back in 48 hours. Richard sat in his hotel room in Las Vegas, the closest decent accommodation to Emily's desert town, staring at the document that changed everything. The scientific jargon all boiled down to one simple fact: 99.97% probability of paternity. Emily Dawson was his daughter. He'd known somehow. The moment he saw that medallion, something in his soul had recognized her. But knowing and having proof were two different animals entirely. His phone buzzed. The lead investigator, Marcus Chen, always worked fast. Mr. Hale, you're going to want to sit down for this. I'm already sitting. Then hold on tight. Papers shuffled on the other end. We traced the financial records like you asked. Your mother made some very interesting transactions starting in July 1998. Richard's jaw clenched. Go on. Monthly wire transfers to a facility called Desert Haven Psychiatric Care in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They've been going out like clockwork for 26 years. Same amount every month. $50,000. $50,000 for what? That's what we're trying to figure out. But here's where it gets weird. The facility barely exists on paper. No website, minimal public records, no reviews. It's a ghost operation. The kind of place that only takes private referrals and cash payments. Richard's blood ran cold. What kind of facility are we talking about? Officially, long-term psychiatric care for wealthy families who want privacy. Unofficially, Marcus paused. The kind of place where people get disappeared and everyone looks the other way. The room spun. Richard gripped the edge of the desk. Grace? We're not certain yet. But it's her. I know it is. His voice broke. My mother didn't kill her, she locked her away. Mr. Haley, I need you to understand that we're dealing with some serious legal gray areas here. If we're right, we're talking about kidnapping, false imprisonment, possibly worse. Your mother has connections, money, lawyers. I don't care. Richard stood up, pacing. Find out everything about that facility. Patient records, staff, security footage if they have it. I want to know who's there and why. Already on it. But there's something else. Marcus's voice dropped. We found 3 former employees willing to talk. Off the record, they all tell the same story. There's a patient there, admitted under the name Jane Whitmore. No family, no visitors. Been there for over 2 decades. They say she's been asking about a baby for years. Richard couldn't breathe. Sir, how fast can you get me into that facility? Legally, you'd need a court order, which could take weeks. Your mother's lawyers would fight it every step. I don't care about legally. Richard's voice turned to steel. I care about now. A long pause. I can't officially condone. Then unofficially. Marcus sighed. I have a contact who might be able to get you in as a potential client touring the facility. But if things go sideways, I was never part of this conversation. Done. Set it up. After hanging up, Richard stood at the window watching the Las Vegas Strip light up the night. Somewhere 3 hours away, Grace might be alive, locked in a psychiatric facility, asking about a baby she'd never gotten to hold. 26 years. His mother had kept her prisoner for 26 years. The rage that flooded through him was so intense he had to grip the windowsill to stay standing. Margaret Hale, the woman who'd raised him, who'd taught him about legacy and honor and family, was a monster. Pure, calculated evil wrapped in pearls and politeness. His phone rang again. Clara. He almost didn't answer, but they'd been married for 19 years. Whatever else was broken between them, She deserved better than silence. "Richard." Her voice was strained. "Where are you?" "Nevada." "I know. Your secretary told me you flew to Vegas. What I meant was, where are you emotionally? Because you disappeared 3 days ago with barely an explanation. And now I'm hearing from Marcus Chen's assistant that you're investigating your mother." Richard closed his eyes. Clara wasn't stupid. She'd always known he didn't love her, but she'd played her part in their arrangement with grace and dignity. She deserved honesty now. "I found my daughter." Silence. Then, "What?" "Grace was pregnant when she disappeared. My mother knew, I think." "Clara, I think she's been keeping Grace prisoner all these years." The sharp intake of breath told him everything. "Oh my God, Richard. I need you to do something for me." His voice steadied. "My mother has files in her study, financial records, legal documents, things she thinks no one knows about. You've been to enough family dinners to know where she keeps them. You want me to search her house. I need proof, real, tangible proof that will hold up in court. Marcus is good, but anything he finds could be called illegally obtained. You, on the other hand, are family. If you happen to find documents while visiting your mother-in-law." Another pause. When Clara spoke again, her voice was different, stronger. "I'll do it, Clara. You don't love me, Richard. You never have. I've made peace with that." She laughed, bitter and tired. "But I've spent 19 years playing the dutiful Hale wife, and your mother has treated me like a decorative accessory the entire time. If she's done what you think she's done, then I want to help burn her world down." Something shifted in Richard's chest. Not love. They'd never have that. But respect. Real, genuine respect. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If she catches me, we're both screwed." After she hung up, Richard sat in the dark hotel room, pieces of a horrific puzzle clicking into place. His mother had discovered Grace's pregnancy, instead of killing her, which would have drawn investigation, questions, risk. She'd made her disappear, faked the accident, forged the death records, and locked Grace away in a private facility where no one would think to look. But why keep her alive? Why not just finish it? The answer made Richard sick, because Margaret Hale was sadistic. Killing Grace would have been mercy, but keeping her alive, locked away, unable to escape or contact anyone, that was revenge, living torture. Margaret could wake up every day knowing that Grace was suffering, and she'd orchestrated every moment of it, and the baby, Emily, had been given to some random woman in Nevada with threats and falsified documents, scattered to the wind, untraceable, completely severed from her parents. It was brilliant in its cruelty, efficient, thorough. Richard wanted to vomit. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Contact at Desert Haven confirmed. Tour scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. We'll send details." Tomorrow, in less than 24 hours, he might see Grace again, if she was even still herself after 26 years in that place. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Richard opened it, frowning. "I know what you're looking for. Meet me at the address below. Come alone. Destroy this message." A friend every instinct screamed trap. But the address was in Albuquerque, near the facility. Someone knew something. Richard grabbed his keys. He'd meet Emily in the morning as planned. Show her the DNA results. Explain what he'd found. But tonight he was driving to Albuquerque. 3 hours later. Albuquerque, the address, led to a rundown diner on the outskirts of the city. Richard parked and walked in, hyper-aware of every person, every shadow. A woman in her 50s sat in a corner booth, coffee cup untouched. She had the worn look of someone who'd seen too much and carried it badly. "Mr. Hale?" She didn't stand. "Sit. We don't have much time." "Who are you?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is, I worked at Desert Haven for 12 years. Quit 6 months ago when I couldn't stomach it anymore." She pushed a manila envelope across the table. "This is everything I could copy without getting caught. Patient records for Jane Whitmore. Medication logs. Incident reports." Richard's hand shook as he opened it. Inside were photocopied documents, handwritten notes, and a photograph. The photograph showed a woman with graying hair, hollow eyes, and a hospital gown. She looked lost, broken, but Richard would have recognized that face anywhere. "Grace, She's been asking about a baby for 26 years, the woman continued quietly. Used to scream about it when she first came in. They drugged her heavily to keep her quiet by year 5. She'd learned to stop asking out loud, but I'd see her sometimes, late at night, crying and whispering, my baby, over and over. Tears streamed down Richard's face. He didn't bother wiping them away. Why are you giving this to me? Because what they did to her is evil, and I can't live with being part of it anymore. The woman stood. Get her out of there, and make whoever did this pay. She left before Richard could respond. He sat alone in the diner, holding proof that Grace was alive, that she'd been suffering for decades, that his mother was a monster. Tomorrow he'd tell Emily. Tomorrow they'd plan. But tonight, Richard let himself break. For Grace, for Emily, for the 26 years they'd all lost. Outside, Albuquerque sprawled under a cold sky, keeping one less secret than it had an hour ago. Richard drove through the night, arriving back in Nevada just as dawn painted the desert, pink and gold. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. The photograph of Grace, hollow-eyed, broken, was burned into his mind. The diner was empty except for Emily, who sat in the same booth where he'd first seen her. She looked exhausted, the medallion catching the early morning light. You look like hell, she said when he slid across from her. I feel worse. He pulled out the DNA results with shaking hands. But we need to start here. Emily stared at the document. Her finger traced the line that said 99,97% probability of paternity over and over, like she could change it by touching it enough times. So it's real, she whispered. It's real. My whole life, everything Grandma told me, was a lie designed to protect you. Richard leaned forward. Emily, I need to show you something else, but I'm warning you. It's going to be hard to see. He pulled out the manila envelope. Inside were the documents from Desert Haven, the medication logs, the incident reports, and the photograph. Emily picked it up, stared at it. Her hands started shaking. Who is this? Her name is Grace Bennett. Richard's voice cracked. She's your mother, and she's alive. The photograph slipped from Emily's fingers. What? My mother didn't kill her. She imprisoned her. For 26 years. The words tasted like poison. Grace was locked in a psychiatric facility in Albuquerque. She's been there since before you were born. Emily couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The world had stopped making sense. I'm going to get her out, Richard continued. Today, I have a way into the facility, but I wanted you to know first, to give you the choice of whether I'm coming with you. Emily, that's my mother. Her voice was steel-wrapped in fury. I've spent 25 years thinking she was dead. If she's alive, if she's been suffering this whole time, then I'm damn well going to be there when she gets out. Richard saw himself in her then. The same stubborn determination, the same inability to walk away from something that mattered. His daughter. Okay, he said softly. We leave in an hour. The drive to Albuquerque felt endless. Emily sat in the passenger seat of Richard's rental car, clutching the photograph, memorizing every detail of her mother's face. She looked broken. That was the word that kept echoing in Emily's mind. Not sad or tired, broken, like something fundamental inside her had shattered and never healed. Tell me about her, Emily said suddenly. Before, what was she like? Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She was light. That's the only word I can think of. Grace had this way of making everything feel possible. She worked in a flower shop, spent her days arranging bouquets, and she was happier than anyone I'd ever met in Boston's high society. How did you meet? I ducked into her shop to get out of the rain. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She was humming while she worked. I asked her what song it was. She said she didn't know. She just made them up as she went. Emily's throat tightened. Did she know about me? That she was pregnant? Yes. She told me the day before we planned to elope. Richard's voice broke. She was terrified and excited and so beautiful. I promised her we'd get married, raise you together, tell my mother to go to hell if she tried to interfere. But she did interfere. I should have protected her better, should have seen it coming. My mother is obsessed with control, with the Hale name staying pure. He spat the word like a curse. Grace was a florist from a working-class family in my mother's eyes that made her disposable. They drove in silence for a while. Finally, Emily asked the question that had been eating at her. Why keep her alive if your mother wanted her gone? Why not just finish it? Richard's face darkened. Because my mother is a sadist. Killing Grace would have been mercy, but keeping her locked away, unable to escape, unable to contact anyone, that's torture. Every day for 26 years, my mother could wake up knowing Grace was suffering. It was revenge. Emily felt sick. And me. You were given to Evelyn with threats and falsified documents, scattered to the wind where I'd never find you. Richard glanced at her. My mother didn't just want Grace gone. She wanted to erase her completely. Erase you. Erase any evidence that we'd ever loved each other. She failed. Yes. Richard's voice turned fierce. She failed because you're here. Grace is alive, and we're going to burn my mother's world to the ground. Desert Haven Psychiatric Care looked innocuous from the outside. A low, sprawling building surrounded by desert scrub and a high fence. The kind of place that could be a hospital or a prison, depending on which side of the door you were on. Marcus met them in the parking lot. The tour is set. Your potential client's looking for long-term care for an elderly relative, Emily. You're his assistant. Don't talk unless spoken to. And for God's sake, don't do anything that'll get you thrown out. I'll behave, Emily said through gritted teeth. The facility director, a thin man with a practiced smile, met them at the entrance. Mr. Hale, welcome to Desert Haven. I understand you're looking for discreet. Quality care? The most discreet, Richard said smoothly, slipping into the businessman persona like a second skin. Money is no object. Privacy is everything. Of course. Right this way. They walked through sterile hallways that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Patients shuffled past in hospital gowns, their eyes vacant. Emily's stomach churned. Our residents received the finest care, the director droned. 24-hour supervision, personalized treatment plans, complete discretion. What about that woman? Richard pointed to a figure at the end of the hallway. She stood at a window, back to them, gray hair falling past her shoulders. Something about the way she held herself, even broken, even defeated, made Emily's breath catch. Oh, that's Jane. Long-term resident. Very quiet. No trouble at all. Richard started walking toward her. The director called after him. Sir, we prefer not to disturb. But Richard was already there. Grace. The woman turned. Time stopped. Emily saw her mother's face. Older. Worn. Marked by suffering. But unmistakably the same woman from the medallion. Those eyes. Those same eyes Emily saw in the mirror every morning. Grace stared at Richard. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Richard. Her voice was a whisper, rough from disuse. Is this real? It's real. He moved toward her slowly, like approaching something fragile. I'm here. I found you, Grace. I'm so sorry. She collapsed into his arms. 26 years of grief, pain, and longing exploded in that moment. Grace sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed torn from her soul. Richard held her, his own tears flowing freely, whispering apologies and promises into her hair. The director looked panicked. Sir, this is highly irregular. Call security if you want, Emily said coldly, not taking her eyes off her parents. But we're not leaving without her. Grace suddenly pulled back from Richard, her eyes wild. The baby. They took my baby. I had a baby girl, and they took her. Grace. Richard cupped her face gently. She's here. She's alive. Grace's gaze swung to Emily. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Emily stepped forward. Hi, Mom. The sound Grace made was inhuman. Joy and agony mixed together. She reached out with trembling hands, touching Emily's face like she was afraid she might disappear. My baby, she breathed. My baby, you're so beautiful. Her knees buckled. Emily caught her, and suddenly they were both on the floor, holding each other, crying. Grace's hands wouldn't stop moving, touching Emily's face, her hair, her shoulders, like she was trying to memorize every detail through touch alone. I never stopped thinking about you, Grace whispered. Never. Every day. Every single day. I know, Emily sobbed. I know I'm here now. We're going to get you out of here. Security arrived. The director was shouting something about protocols and legal guardianship. Marcus appeared with paperwork. Real paperwork. Legally obtained through channels Richard's money had opened overnight. She's coming with us, Richard said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Her imprisonment here was illegal. If you try to stop us, I will have every lawyer on the East Coast crawling up your ass by sunset. The director paled. Whatever Margaret had paid, it clearly wasn't enough to deal with this. They left together, Grace between Richard and Emily, supported by both because her legs wouldn't hold her after 26 years of drugs and imprisonment. The New Mexico sun was blinding after decades of fluorescent lights. Grace stopped at the threshold, staring at the open sky like she'd forgotten what blue looked like. It's real, she asked again, her voice small and broken. You're both real. We're real, Emily said, squeezing her hand. And we're never letting you go again. As they drove away, Grace kept turning around to look at the facility disappearing behind them, as if afraid it might swallow her back up. But for the first time in 26 years, she was free, and somewhere in Boston, Margaret Hale had no idea that her carefully constructed empire of lies was about to come crashing down. They brought Grace to Richard's hotel suite in Las Vegas. She stood in the middle of the room, turning in slow circles, touching the furniture like she couldn't believe it was solid. It's so big, she whispered, and bright. Everything at Desert Haven was white. Just white. Emily watched her mother move through the space, hesitant, like a wild animal learning to trust again. Grace's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every sudden noise made her flinch. Richard ordered room service. Soup, bread, nothing heavy. Grace hadn't had real food in God knows how long. When it arrived, she stared at the tray like it might be a trap. It's okay, Emily said softly, sitting beside her. You can eat. Grace picked up the spoon, then put it down, picked it up again. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't remember how to do this, how to be normal. They kept me so drugged for years, I can't. Her breath hitched. What if I can't come back from this? Then we'll figure it out together. Emily took her mother's hand. The skin was papery thin, marked with old scars. You survived 26 years in that place. You can survive this. Grace's fingers closed around Emily's. She stared at their joined hands for a long moment, then looked up at Emily's face. Really looked. You have his eyes, she said. Richard's eyes, but my nose and my mother's chin. Fresh tears spilled over. I used to imagine what you'd look like, every day, every single day. I'd picture you, as a baby, as a toddler, starting school, graduating, falling in love. I created an entire life for you in my head, because it was the only way to survive. What did you imagine? Happy things. I imagined you were loved, that whoever had you was kind, that you were safe. Grace's voice cracked. Was I right? Were you happy? Emily thought about Grandma Evelyn working 3 jobs, about growing up in a trailer, wearing secondhand clothes, never quite having enough, but also about warm hugs, bedtime stories, someone who showed up to every school event no matter how tired she was. I was loved, Emily said carefully. Grandma Evelyn, the woman who raised me, she gave me everything she had. It wasn't much, but it was real. Then I'm grateful to her. Grace squeezed her hand. Even if it was all a lie, even if she was part of, whatever this was, she kept you safe. That's all I ever wanted. She didn't know, Emily said quickly, about you being alive. I mean, Margaret threatened her, showed up with me as a baby, with fake documents saying her daughter had died in childbirth. Evelyn was terrified. She kept me because she thought it was the only way to protect me. Grace nodded slowly, processing. Margaret, Richard's mother. Yes, something changed in Grace's expression. The brokenness giving way to something harder, colder. She took everything from me, my child, my life, my mind. 26 years. Her hands clenched into fists. Does she know yet that you found me? Not yet, Richard said from across the room. He'd been giving them space, but listening to every word. But she will soon, and when she does, I'm going to make sure she pays for every single day she stole from us. Grace stood abruptly. I want to see her. Grace. I want to look her in the eye and tell her she failed. Grace's voice shook but held firm. She tried to erase me, to make me disappear like I never existed. But I'm still here, broken, yes, damaged, absolutely, but alive. And I want her to see that. Emily stood too, facing her mother. Then we'll make sure she sees it, but not yet. You need time to... I've had 26 years of time. Grace's voice rose, cracking. Do you know what it's like, being kept in a cage, pumped full of drugs, having everyone tell you that your memories are delusions, that the baby you remember is just psychosis, that the man you loved never existed? Her breath came in gasps now, panic rising. They told me I was crazy, over and over, that I'd made it all up. Eventually, I started to believe them. I'd forget what was real and what was the drugs. I'd forget Richard's face, forget what my own voice sounded like. She choked on a sob. I forgot how to be human. Emily grabbed her mother's shoulders. Look at me, Grace, look at me. Grace's eyes were wild, lost in memory and trauma. You're not there anymore, Emily said firmly. You're here, with me, with Richard. You're out, you're safe. And I swear to God we will make Margaret pay. But right now, I need you to breathe. Can you do that? Just breathe with me. Grace tried. Failed. Tried again. Slowly. Her breathing evened out, though tears continued streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. You just found me and I'm already falling apart. You're allowed to fall apart. Emily pulled her into a hug. Mom, you survived something that should have killed you. If you need to fall apart, then fall apart will catch you. The word mom seemed to break something in Grace. She crumpled, and Emily held her while she sobbed. 26 years of pain finally finding release. Richard watched them, his own face wet with tears. His phone buzzed. Clara, he stepped into the hallway to answer. Did you find something? Everything. Clara's voice was grim. Richard, your mother kept records, detailed records, payments to Desert Haven, legal documents forging Grace's death certificate, even communications with the people who took Emily to Nevada. She documented her own crimes like some kind of sick trophy collection. Can you get them out of the house? Already done. They're in a safety deposit box under my name. I also found something else. A journal. Your mother wrote about it. About deciding to keep Grace alive specifically to make her suffer. She called it appropriate punishment for attempting to corrupt the Hale bloodline. Clara's voice shook. Richard, she's a monster. I know. What are you going to do? Destroy her. His voice was ice. Every connection, every friend, every shred of respect she has in Boston society. I'm going to burn it all down. Good. Clara paused. I'm filing for divorce. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Clara, we should have done this years ago. You've been in love with a ghost since the day we met, and I've been pretending it didn't matter. She laughed. Bitter but not unkind. Turns out she wasn't a ghost after all. Go be with your family, Richard, the real one. She hung up before he could respond. Richard stood in the hallway, letting it sink in. His marriage, loveless but comfortable, was over. His mother would be exposed, prosecuted, destroyed. His daughter hated him for not finding her sooner. And the woman he'd loved for 26 years was so traumatized she could barely function. Everything was falling apart. And somehow, for the first time in decades, he felt like something was being built. When he went back inside, Grace had calmed down. She sat on the couch with Emily, both of them talking quietly. Grace was showing Emily the scars on her wrists, thin white lines from the restraints, from the times she'd tried to escape. They'd lock me in solitary after, Grace said softly. 3 days alone in a white room. No windows, no sound, just me and my thoughts. That was worse than the restraints. How did you survive it? Grace touched the side of Emily's face. I thought about you. Every single day. I'd imagine what you were doing. I'd tell you stories in my head. About your father. About how we met. About how much we wanted you. It kept me sane. Barely. But it worked. I wish I'd known, Emily whispered. All those years I thought you were dead. I used to talk to your picture in the medallion, pretending you could hear me. Maybe I could. Grace smiled. The first real smile Richard had seen. It was broken around the edges, but genuine. Maybe some part of me knew you were out there, talking to me, keeping me alive. They sat together as the sun set over Las Vegas, casting long shadows through the hotel windows. 3 people who should have been a family, ripped apart by cruelty and reunited by chance. What happens now? Emily asked. Richard sat across from them. Now we go to Boston. We confront my mother. We make sure she can never hurt anyone again. I'm terrified, Grace admitted, of seeing her, of falling apart again, of not being strong enough. You don't have to be strong, Emily said. That's what we're here for, right, Richard? He nodded. We're in this together, all 3 of us. Grace looked between them, her daughter and the man she'd loved a lifetime ago. I don't know how to be a mother or a partner. I don't even know how to be myself anymore. They took so much from me. Then we'll figure it out as we go, Richard said softly. No pressure, no expectations, just us, whatever that means. For the first time in 26 years, Grace allowed herself to hope. Outside, night fell over the desert, and somewhere in Boston, Margaret Hale's carefully constructed world was about to shatter. The Hale mansion in Beacon Hill looked exactly as Richard remembered. Imposing, cold, a monument to old money and older secrets. He'd grown up in this house, walked these marble floors, and never once felt like it was home. Now, standing at the entrance with Grace and Emily beside him, he realized it had always been a prison, just a prettier one than Desert Haven. I can't do this, Grace whispered, her hand clutching Emily's so tight her knuckles were white. I can't see her. I thought I could, but you can, Emily said firmly. We didn't come all this way to back down now. Behind them, Marcus and 2 lawyers waited with briefcases full of evidence. Clara had delivered everything. The financial records, the journal entries, the falsified documents. It was enough to bury Margaret 10 times over. But Richard wanted more than legal victory. He wanted his mother to see what she'd done, to face the lives she'd destroyed, and know she'd failed. The door opened. Margaret's assistant, Gerald, stared at them in shock. Mr. Hale, we weren't expecting... Where is she? In her study, but sir, she's not well. The doctor said. Richard pushed past him. The others followed. Margaret Hale sat in her wheelchair by the window, her back to the door. At 78, diminished by stroke and age, she should have looked fragile, but something about the set of her shoulders still radiated control. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said without turning around. I heard about your little adventure in Nevada and Albuquerque. Then you know why we're here. Margaret spun the wheelchair to face them. Her eyes, still sharp despite her failing body, swept over Richard, then landed on Grace. Something flickered in her expression, not remorse, more like satisfaction. Grace Bennett, still alive after all these years. How disappointing. Grace flinched like she'd been slapped. Emily moved closer to her mother protectively. And this must be the bastard. Margaret's gaze settled on Emily with cold assessment. You have the Hale eyes. Unfortunate. I'd hoped that at least wouldn't carry through. Her name is Emily, Richard said through clenched teeth. Your granddaughter, though you gave up any right to call her that 26 years ago. Granddaughter? Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That girl is the product of a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment that I spent considerable time and money correcting. Correcting? Emily's voice shook with fury. You kidnapped my mother, stole me from her, locked her away for decades. You call that correcting a mistake? I call it protecting my family. Margaret's voice turned to ice. Your mother was a nobody, a common florist who got her hooks into my son with tears and feminine manipulation. She would have destroyed everything we built. Our name, our standing, our legacy. I did what needed to be done. You kept her prisoner. Richard's shout echoed off the marble walls. You forged death certificates, bribed officials, paid people to torture her. For 26 years, I kept her comfortable. Margaret corrected calmly. Desert Haven is a quality facility. She had a room, 3 meals a day, medical care, Medical care. Grace's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. You drugged me until I couldn't remember my own name. You locked me in solitary when I asked about my baby. You told me I was insane, that Richard never existed, that I'd imagined everything. Her voice grew stronger. You tried to erase me. I should have. Margaret didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. But I thought it more fitting that you live knowing you'd lost, that your child grew up without you, that Richard married someone appropriate while you rotted in obscurity. Call it poetic justice. The casual cruelty of it, the calculated sadism, stole the breath from Richard's lungs. You're a monster, Emily said. I'm a mother. Margaret's eyes glittered. Everything I did was for Richard, to save him from ruining his life with an inappropriate match, to preserve our family's integrity. A real mother makes the hard choices. A real mother doesn't destroy lives. Emily stepped forward, shaking with rage. You stole my childhood. I grew up in poverty, wondering who my parents were, why I was alone. Do you have any idea what that's like? Being the kid with no mom, no dad, nothing but questions and a medallion. Your circumstances were regrettable but necessary. Stop. Richard's voice was deadly quiet. Stop talking like this was some business decision. You tortured Grace. You abandoned Emily. You robbed me of 26 years with my daughter. This wasn't protection. This was evil. Margaret's facade cracked slightly. Everything I did was for you. That woman would have dragged you down. You would have been nothing. Married to a florist. Raising a baby in some tiny apartment. Throwing away your potential. I would have been happy. Richard's voice broke. Don't you understand? I loved her. I wanted that life. You didn't save me from anything. You destroyed the only thing I ever actually wanted. You were infatuated. You would have gotten over it. It's been 26 years. I never got over it. I never stopped loving her. He moved to stand beside Grace, taking her hand. Everything you did, all your schemes, all your cruelty, it failed. Because we're here, together, and you're about to lose everything. Marcus stepped forward with the lawyers. Mrs. Hale, you're being formally charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, falsifying legal documents, and bribery. These gentlemen are here to serve you with arrest warrants. For the first time, Margaret's composure slipped. You wouldn't dare. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother the day you took Grace from me. Richard's voice was stone. Now you're just a criminal who's about to face justice. The lawyers presented the documents. Margaret's hands shook as she looked through them. Decades of crimes, meticulously documented, impossible to deny. The evidence is overwhelming, one lawyer said. Financial records, testimony from Desert Haven staff, the journal entries where you detail your actions in your own handwriting. You're going to prison, Mrs. Hale. I did what was necessary, Margaret repeated, but her voice wavered now. For the family, for the Hale name. The Hale name is about to become synonymous with cruelty and kidnapping, Richard said coldly. I'm making sure of it. Every newspaper, every news station, they'll all know what you did. Your friends, your social circles, everyone who ever respected you will know you're a monster. Margaret looked at Grace. For a moment, something almost like fear crossed her face. You could have just disappeared, moved on with your life. Why did you have to come back? Grace stepped forward. Despite her trembling, despite everything, she looked Margaret Hale in the eye and said, Because you don't get to win. You tried to erase me, but I'm still here. You tried to keep me from my daughter, but here she is. You tried to destroy our love, but Richard and I found each other again. Her voice steadied. You took 26 years from us, but you don't get the rest. You should be grateful I let you live. Margaret spat. I don't feel grateful. I feel nothing for you. Grace's voice was clear, strong, the most herself she'd sounded since they found her. You're just a sad, cruel woman who destroyed lives to feel powerful, and now you're going to die alone, forgotten, and hated. That's what you earned. Police arrived then, led by Boston PD detectives who'd been briefed by Richard's lawyers. They approached Margaret with handcuffs. This is absurd. Margaret tried to rise from her wheelchair, but her body betrayed her. I won't be treated like some common criminal. Do you know who I am? You're Margaret Hale. the detective said flatly. "And you're under arrest." As they cuffed her and read her rights, Margaret's eyes found Richard one last time. "You'll regret this. Turning on your own mother, the scandal will destroy you too. Let it." Richard felt nothing for her now. No love, no hate, just emptiness where family was supposed to be. "I'd rather have a destroyed reputation and my family than anything you ever offered me." They wheeled Margaret out. Her protests echoed down the marble hallways, growing fainter until the heavy door closed with a final, definitive thud. The mansion fell silent. Emily turned to Grace, who was crying quietly. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Grace admitted. "I thought I'd feel something. Relief, anger, satisfaction. But I just feel empty." "That's normal," Emily said softly. "You spent 26 years imagining this moment. Now that it's here, it's probably nothing like you expected." Grace nodded, wiping her eyes. Then she looked around the mansion. The wealth, the opulence, everything Margaret had valued above human life. "Can we leave?" she asked. "I don't want to be here anymore." "We can go anywhere you want," Richard said, as they walked out of the Hale mansion, possibly for the last time. Clara appeared in the doorway. She looked tired, but lighter somehow. "I heard," she said simply. "Thank you," Richard told her, "for everything. The documents, the evidence. We couldn't have done this without you." Clara nodded, then looked at Grace. "I'm sorry for being part of all of this, even unknowingly. You helped free me," Grace said quietly. "That's all that matters now." They left together, stepping out into Boston sunshine that felt impossibly bright after the darkness of the mansion. Behind them, the Hale Empire began its collapse. And ahead of them, finally, was the possibility of healing. 6 months later, Suffolk County Courthouse, Boston. The courtroom was packed. Media outlets from across the country had descended on Boston for what they were calling the trial of the decade. A story with everything: old money, kidnapping, a love torn apart and miraculously reunited. The public couldn't get enough. Emily sat in the front row between Richard and Evelyn, who'd flown in from Nevada. Despite her terror of flying, Grace was in the witness room. Preparing to testify, she'd been doing better. Therapy 3 times a week, medication for the PTSD, good days and bad days. But today was going to push her to her limits. All rise. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, her expression stern. She'd made it clear from day one that she wouldn't tolerate theatrics. This was a courtroom, not a circus. Regardless of how many cameras waited outside, Margaret Hale was wheeled in by her defense attorney, Lawrence Ashford, the best lawyer money could buy. Despite 6 months in pretrial detention, Margaret still carried herself with that infuriating dignity. Hair perfect, posture straight, eyes cold. The charges were read: kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, falsifying government documents, bribery, obstruction of justice, decades of crimes, meticulously documented. Margaret pleaded not guilty to everything. The prosecution called their first witness, Dr. Raymond Torres, former medical director at Desert Haven. "Dr. Torres, can you describe the patient admitted as Jane Whitmore in July 1998? Female, approximately 25 years old, pregnant. She was admitted against her will, sedated during transport." His voice was clinical, detached. The admission paperwork was signed by Margaret Hale, who claimed to be the patient's legal guardian due to mental incompetence. Was the patient mentally incompetent? No. Her initial evaluation showed no signs of psychosis, delusion, or any condition requiring involuntary commitment. She was traumatized, terrified, and pregnant, not insane. Yet she remained at Desert Haven for 26 years. Why? Dr. Torres shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hale paid substantial fees to keep the patient sedated and compliant. When I questioned the treatment plan, I was told to mind my business or lose my medical license. Mrs. Hale had connections with the state medical board. Did you ever see evidence of physical restraints? Yes. Wrist and ankle restraints were used frequently when the patient became agitated, which was often, given that she was being held prisoner. Ashford objected. Speculation. The witness cannot determine the patient's state of mind. Sustained, but the damage was done. The jury had seen the medical records. the photographs of Grace's scarred wrists, the logs detailing years of forced sedation. The prosecution called more witnesses, nurses who'd quit Desert Haven because they couldn't stomach the treatment, financial experts who traced Margaret's payments, police investigators who'd uncovered the falsified death certificate. Each testimony built an undeniable picture. Margaret Hale had orchestrated a calculated, methodical kidnapping and imprisonment that lasted over 2 decades. Then came Grace's turn. Emily watched her mother walk to the witness stand, wearing a simple blue dress that Evelyn had helped her pick out. Grace's hands trembled as she was sworn in, but her voice held steady. "Ms. Bennett, please tell the court what happened on July 18, 1998. Grace took a breath. "I was closing my flower shop around 8 p.m. 2 men grabbed me from behind. They put something over my face. Chloroform, I think, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a van, tied up, driving somewhere I didn't recognize. What happened next? They took me to a facility, Desert Haven, I learned later. I was 2 months pregnant. I begged them to let me go. Told them about the baby, about Richard. They didn't care." Her voice cracked but held. "A woman came to see me, Margaret Hale. She told me I was never leaving, that I'd have the baby and then both of us would disappear. What did you say to her?" "I told her she couldn't do this, that Richard would look for me." She laughed and said, "Richard thought I was dead, that my car had been found destroyed, and everyone believed I'd died in the accident. She said she'd made sure of it." The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of reporters' pens. "Ms. Bennett, when did you give birth?" "March 3rd, 1999. They wouldn't let me go to a hospital. A doctor came to Desert Haven. I was in labor for 16 hours. Tears streamed down Grace's face now. "When my daughter was born, they let me hold her for maybe 10 minutes. Then Margaret took her away. She said I'd never see her again, that my baby would grow up thinking I was dead." Emily felt her own tears falling. Evelyn squeezed her hand. "I screamed until my voice gave out." Grace continued. "I fought. They put me in restraints. In solitary, they increased my medication until I could barely remember my own name. For years, I didn't know if my baby was alive or dead. Didn't know if Richard was looking for me or if he'd moved on. I didn't know anything except that I was being punished for falling in love." "Ms. Bennett, how did you survive 26 years in captivity?" Grace looked directly at Emily. "I thought about my daughter. Every single day. I imagined her growing up, learning to walk, going to school, falling in love. I told her stories in my head about her father and me, about how much we wanted her. It was the only thing that kept me sane." The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. No further questions." Ashford stood for cross-examination. He was smooth, professional, and ruthless. "Ms. Bennett, you were institutionalized for over 2 decades. You were on heavy psychiatric medication for years. How can you be certain your memories of these events are accurate and not delusions influenced by your treatment?" Grace's eyes flashed. "Because I have the scars to prove it. Because my daughter exists. Because 26 years of my life are gone. And Margaret Hale is the reason why. You admit to being heavily medicated. Isn't it possible that your memories are confused? That perhaps you did suffer from mental illness and the treatment was appropriate? I wasn't mentally ill. I was kidnapped. Can you prove you didn't enter Desert Haven voluntarily? Why would I voluntarily leave my life, my business, the man I loved, and a baby I desperately wanted?" Grace's voice rose. "What possible reason would I have to fake my own death and lock myself away for 26 years? Ashford smiled coldly. "Perhaps you were overwhelmed by the pregnancy. Perhaps you wanted to escape. Perhaps—" "That's enough." Judge Morrison's voice cut through the courtroom. "Mr. Ashford, unless you have actual evidence to support these theories, I suggest you move on." The cross-examination continued. But Ashford couldn't shake Grace's testimony. Her pain was too real, her story too consistent with the mountain of evidence. When she finally stepped down, Richard met her at the barrier. "You did perfectly," he whispered. But Grace looked shattered, reliving it all in front of strangers, having her trauma questioned and dissected. It had taken everything she had. Emily was called next. She walked to the stand, feeling every eye in the courtroom on her. Margaret's gaze was particularly intense. cold, calculating, still unrepentant. Ms. Dawson, when did you first learn about your biological parents? 6 months ago, a man came into the diner where I work and recognized my mother's photograph in my medallion. That man was Richard Hale. What were you told about your origins growing up? That my mother died giving birth to me. That my father was unknown. That my grandmother Evelyn was my only family. Emily's voice hardened. All lies. Lies told. Because Margaret Hale threatened my grandmother into silence. Tell us about growing up without your biological parents. Emily took a breath. I grew up poor, really poor. My grandmother worked multiple jobs just to keep us fed. I wore secondhand clothes, qualified for free lunch at school, couldn't afford college without scholarships. I spent my childhood wondering why I was alone, why I didn't have parents like other kids. I'd look at my mother's picture and imagine what she was like, what she'd think of me. Her voice broke. I thought she was dead. I mourned someone I'd never met. And the whole time, she was alive, locked away, asking about me. We lost 25 years because Margaret Hale decided our lives didn't matter as much as her precious family name. No further questions. Ashford tried to shake her testimony, but Emily was ready for him. Isn't it true that your grandmother provided a loving home? Yes, but that doesn't excuse what was done to my mother, to me, to Richard. You seem to have turned out fine despite these circumstances. Emily's eyes blazed. I turned out fine despite Margaret Hale, not because of her, and my mother spent 26 years in hell. How dare you suggest that's acceptable? The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison called for order. When Emily stepped down, she walked directly to Grace and hugged her tight. We did it, Mom. The trial continued for 3 more weeks. Character witnesses, expert testimony, closing arguments that painted Margaret as either a monster or a misguided mother trying to protect her son. Finally, the jury deliberated. They were out for only 6 hours. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Emily held Grace's hand on one side and Richard's on the other. On the charge of kidnapping, how do you find guilty? On the charge of false imprisonment, guilty, 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 down the list. Every single charge. Margaret's face remained impassive, but her hands clenched the arms of her wheelchair. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison made it clear, given the severity and duration of the crimes, Margaret Hale would spend the rest of her life in prison. As they led her away, Margaret looked back at Richard one last time. He felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, just emptiness where a mother should have been. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed, but Richard, Grace, Emily, and Evelyn pushed through together, a family finally whole. 1 year after the trial, Emily stood in the office of the Grace Bennett Foundation, looking at the wall of photographs. Women who'd been helped, families reunited, lives rebuilt. What had started as Richard's attempt at redemption had become something bigger, something real. We got another referral from New Mexico, her assistant said, handing over a file. Woman held captive by her husband's family for 8 years. They finally got her out. Set up a meeting, get her connected with Dr. Ramos for trauma therapy and housing assistance. Emily marked the file. And make sure she knows she's safe now. Running the foundation had given Emily purpose beyond nursing school, though she'd finished that too, graduating top of her class. Now she split her time between working at Boston General's trauma unit and managing the foundation's operations. Your mom called, the assistant added. Something about dinner plans. Emily smiled. A year ago, the phrase "your mom called" would have been impossible. Now it was routine. Beautiful. Ordinary. Routine. Grace had come so far. The first few months after the trial had been brutal. Nightmares, panic attacks, days where she couldn't get out of bed. But therapy helped. Being around family helped. And slowly, painfully, she'd started to reclaim pieces of herself. She'd even started working with flowers again. Nothing professional yet, just arranging bouquets in the foundation office, bringing color and life to the space. Small steps. Tell her I'll be there at 6, Emily said. Richard sat in his downtown office, signing the final papers dissolving Hale Pharmaceuticals. The company would be absorbed by a competitor. The Hale name erased from the business world. His mother's legacy. Dismantled. Clara's divorce papers sat on his desk too. Signed and finalized. She'd remarried 6 months ago. A literature professor she'd met at a bookshop. Richard had attended the wedding. They'd even danced. 2 people who'd wasted years in a loveless marriage, finally free to find happiness elsewhere. "Mr. Hale?" His secretary knocked. "There's someone here to see you, says it's important." "I don't have any appointments." But she was already being ushered in. A woman, late 70s, nervous hands clutching a worn purse. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Dorothy Winters. I saw your foundation's information in the news, and I think I might know something about your mother." Richard gestured to a chair. "Please sit. What do you know?" Dorothy took a shaky breath. 30 years ago, I worked as a housekeeper for the Hale family. I cleaned your mother's study every week. One day I found a letter she'd hidden, from a young woman begging Margaret not to send her away. The woman was pregnant. The letter mentioned your name." Richard's blood went cold. "What did you do?" "Nothing. I was terrified. Margaret paid well, and I needed the job. But I kept a copy of the letter. I've carried it with me for 3 decades, feeling guilty." She pulled out a yellowed envelope. "When I saw the trial coverage, saw what Margaret did to Grace Bennett, I realized there might have been others, women I could have saved if I'd spoken up." Richard took the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was desperate, pleading. "Mrs. Hale, please. I love Richard. This baby is a blessing, not a mistake. Please don't make me disappear. I'm begging you." It was dated 6 months before Grace was kidnapped. "There were others," Richard whispered. "I don't know for certain," Dorothy said. "But Margaret was obsessive about controlling your relationships. Every woman you dated, she investigated. Several just vanished from your life without explanation. I always wondered." After Dorothy left, Richard called Marcus immediately. "I need you to investigate something. Every woman I dated before Grace. Find out what happened to them, especially the ones who disappeared suddenly. You think your mother?" "I think we only uncovered the tip of the iceberg." Grace sat in Dr. Ramos's office for her weekly therapy session. The room was comfortable now, familiar. She'd spent a year coming here, unpacking trauma, learning to live again. "How are the nightmares?" Dr. Ramos asked. "Better. I had 2 this week instead of 5. Progress." Grace managed a small smile. "I even slept through the whole night once. That's significant. What do you think helped?" "Richard, Emily, knowing they're there when I wake up." Grace twisted her hands. "I still have moments where I panic, where I think I'm back at Desert Haven, but they're getting shorter. You've made remarkable progress, Grace. A year ago, you could barely leave the house. A year ago, I could barely function." Grace looked out the window at Boston streets bustling with life. "Now I can walk to the grocery store without having a panic attack. I can eat in restaurants. I even went to a movie theater last week." "How was that?" "Overwhelming, but good overwhelming. I cried through the whole thing. Not because of the movie, just because I could be there, because I was free to leave if I wanted." Grace's voice cracked. "Simple things everyone takes for granted feel like miracles to me. They are miracles. You survived something that destroys most people. You're rebuilding yourself from scratch." Grace nodded, then changed subjects. "Richard asked me to marry him again." Dr. Ramos's eyebrows rose. "And I said I need more time. Not because I don't love him. I do, desperately. But because I need to figure out who I am now. The woman Richard fell in love with died in that facility. I'm someone different. Someone broken and pieced back together wrong. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." "Is there?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I can't be the woman I was at 25. That Grace is gone. What if Richard realizes he's in love with a memory? Not me. Have you talked to him about this?" "Not yet. I'm afraid of the answer." 6 months later, Margaret Hale died alone in her prison cell. Heart failure, the report said. She was 79. Richard got the call at 3 in the morning. He hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time, waiting to feel something. Grief, relief, anger, anything. Nothing came. He'd buried his mother emotionally a year and a half ago, the day she was sentenced. This was just paperwork. The funeral was small. Richard attended alone. Grace and Emily had no desire to go. Clara sent flowers but stayed away, A handful of distant relatives showed up out of obligation as they lowered the casket. Richard thought about legacy. His mother had spent her life building the Hale name, protecting it, sacrificing everything to maintain its prestige. And what did she have to show for it? A lonely death, a reviled memory, and a son who felt nothing but emptiness when she died. "Goodbye, Mother," he said quietly. Then he walked away without looking back. Present day, Emily finished her shift at Boston General and drove to the house Richard had bought in Cambridge. Big enough for all of them, but cozy enough to feel like home. Evelyn had moved in 6 months ago, finally convinced to leave Nevada. She walked in to find Grace and Evelyn cooking dinner together, laughing about something. The sight still made Emily's chest tight with emotion. Grace lit up. "Perfect timing. I need your opinion. Does this need more garlic?" Emily tasted the sauce. "Definitely. Told you?" Evelyn said smugly. The girl knows her food. Richard came downstairs, drawn by the noise and laughter. He stopped in the doorway, just watching. His daughter, the woman he loved, and the grandmother who'd saved Emily when no one else would. A family built from ruins. Grace caught his eye and smiled. That smile still hit him like the first time he saw her in the flower shop 27 years ago. Maybe more, because now he knew how precious it was. How hard-won. Later, after dinner, Grace found Richard on the back porch. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said quietly. Richard's heart hammered. "And I'm ready. Not because I have everything figured out. I probably never will. But because I don't want to wait anymore. We've lost enough time." She took his hand. "Let's get married. Let's have the life Margaret tried to steal from us." Richard pulled her close. And for the first time in 27 years, the weight he'd carried finally lifted. Inside, Emily and Evelyn cleaned up, arguing good-naturedly about who was washing and who was drying. Through the window, they could see Richard and Grace holding each other. "You think they'll be okay?" Evelyn asked. Emily watched her parents, broken people learning to be whole again, and smiled. "Yeah, Grandma, I think they'll be just fine." Outside, stars appeared over Cambridge. Somewhere, Margaret Hale was in the ground, her cruelty finally buried with her. And somewhere else, right here, in this kitchen, on this porch, a family that shouldn't exist was learning to thrive. The past couldn't be changed. The years stolen couldn't be returned. But the future was theirs to write. 2 years after the trial, Nevada desert. The sun was setting over the desert, painting everything gold and crimson. Emily stood outside Rick's Stop and Go, the gas station where it all started, and smiled at the transformation. The old, run-down place had been renovated, turned into a community center funded by the Grace Bennett Foundation. The pumps still worked, but now there was also a resource center for domestic violence survivors, a legal aid office, and a small clinic. Full circle. "You ready?" Richard asked, adjusting his tie. He looked nervous, more nervous than he'd been facing down his mother in court. "It's your wedding day. You're supposed to be nervous," Emily teased. "I've waited 27 years for this. I'm terrified something will go wrong." "Nothing's going wrong. Mom's not going to change her mind, if that's what you're worried about." Richard exhaled. "How is she?" "Evelyn's with her. They're both crying happy tears and arguing about makeup, so, normal wedding stuff. Guests were arriving. Not many, maybe 40 people. Clara came with her husband, Thomas, who taught poetry at BU, Marcus and his wife, staff from the foundation, Dr. Ramos, who'd become more friend than therapist over the past 2 years. A few of Richard's colleagues who'd stood by him when the scandal broke, and nurses from Emily's trauma unit, who'd adopted Grace as their honorary mascot after she started volunteering there, bringing flowers to patients who needed something beautiful to look at. Small, intimate, perfect. The ceremony would happen right here, in the desert, where Richard had first seen Emily's medallion, where everything had changed. 5 minutes, the coordinator called. Richard took his place under the arch, simple wood and white fabric. Decorated with wildflowers, Grace had arranged herself. His hands shook. Emily squeezed his shoulder as she passed, taking her spot as maid of honor. Then the music started. Something soft, acoustic. Not the traditional wedding march. Grace had been specific about that. Nothing traditional. This was their wedding. They're rules. Evelyn appeared first, walking slowly, using her cane but steady. She took her seat in the front row, dabbing her eyes. Then Grace. She walked alone. Her choice. "I've been led around by other people long enough," she'd said. "I'm walking to my future on my own 2 feet." She wore a simple cream dress, her hair loose around her shoulders with wildflowers woven through it. No veil, no train, just Grace, finally herself again, walking toward the man she'd loved for 27 years. Richard's breath caught. She was beautiful, not the untouched beauty of 25, but something deeper, scarred and surviving and absolutely radiant. When she reached him, he took her hands. Both of them had tears streaming down their faces. "Hi," Grace whispered. "Hi," Richard managed. "You look like I've been to hell and back. Like you won." The officiant, a kind woman from the community center, cleared her throat. "We're gathered here in the Nevada desert, a place of second chances and new beginnings, to witness the marriage of Richard and Grace. And if that's not poetic enough, I don't know what is." Soft laughter rippled through the small crowd. "Richard and Grace wrote their own vows, Richard. Whenever you're ready." Richard took a breath. 27 years ago, I loved you and lost you. I spent decades thinking you were dead, that I'd failed you, that I'd never get another chance. But here we are, against impossible odds. We found each other again. Grace, you are the strongest person I've ever known. You survived things that should have broken you. And you came out the other side still capable of love, still capable of hope. I don't deserve you, but I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to. I promise to never take a single day for granted. I promise to fight for you, protect you, and love you until my last breath. You're my second chance, and I'm not wasting it." Grace wiped her eyes, smiling through tears. "I don't have pretty words like you do. I spent 26 years talking to myself in a white room, so public speaking isn't really my thing." More laughter. "But here's what I know. Loving you saved my life. When I had nothing else, when I couldn't remember my own face, I remembered yours. I remembered the way you looked at me in the flower shop, the way you made me feel like I mattered. That memory kept me alive. And now, standing here with you and our daughter and our family, I get to have what they tried to steal from us. So my promise is simple. I promise to keep choosing life, keep choosing hope, keep choosing you, every single day for the rest of our lives." There wasn't a dry eye under that desert sky. "By the power vested in me by the state of Nevada, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Richard. Kiss your bride already." He did. Soft, gentle, reverent. A kiss 27 years in the making. The small crowd erupted in applause. Emily hugged them both, laughing and crying. Evelyn stood, applauding louder than anyone. Clara wiped her eyes, genuinely happy for them. The reception was right there, under string lights as the desert cooled and stars appeared. Someone had set up a sound system playing soft music. There was cake, simple vanilla, Grace's favorite, champagne, laughter. Emily watched her parents dance. Slightly awkward, both rusty at this, but beaming at each other like teenagers. Evelyn sat with Dr. Ramos, the 2 older women bonding over shared determination to see their family thrive. Clara approached Emily, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "For you." "Thanks." They stood together, watching the party. "Your mom looks happy," Clara said. "She is, finally." Emily glanced at her. "Thank you for helping us. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. What Margaret did was evil, and I wasted 19 years pretending everything was fine when it wasn't." Clara took a sip. "But I'm happy now. Really happy. And your dad, Richard, deserves that too. He's lucky to have you as a friend. We're all lucky that any of this worked out." Clara smiled. "I should go. Thomas and I have an early flight tomorrow. But Emily, thank you for letting me be part of this. Even though you were never the problem. You were stuck in Margaret's web just like the rest of us." After Clara left, Emily found herself alone for a moment, standing at the edge of the light, looking out at the vast desert darkness. Quite a story, huh? Emily turned. A young woman stood there, mid-20s, Latina, with kind eyes and nervous energy. She held a glass of champagne but hadn't touched it. "Do I know you?" "No. Sorry, I'm Maria Santos. I work at the foundation. Just started last month. She hesitated. I wanted to meet you because I think my family was hurt by Margaret Hale too. Emily's attention sharpened. What do you mean? Maria pulled something from her purse, a silver medallion on a chain. Emily's heart stopped. It was identical to hers. Same size, same design, same worn quality. My mother died when I was a baby, Maria said quietly. Or that's what I was told. But I've been researching, and there are things that don't add up. Documents that don't match. And when I saw the trial coverage, saw what Margaret did to your mother, she opened the medallion, showing a photograph of a beautiful young woman with dark hair and bright eyes. I think Margaret did something to my mother too. I think there were others. The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. Others. Of course there were others. Margaret's obsession with controlling Richard's relationships hadn't started with Grace. Have you told Richard? I wanted to tell you first. Because I don't know what I'm asking for. Justice. Closure. Just answers. Maria's voice cracked. I've spent my whole life not knowing where I came from, and seeing your family, seeing you find your mother and get your answers. It made me realize I can't stop looking. I have to know. Emily looked at the medallion, then at Maria, then back at the party where her parents danced under the stars. 2 years ago, she'd been a waitress with questions and a necklace. Now she had answers, had family, had purpose, and here was someone else. Just starting that same impossible journey, Emily took Maria's hand. Then we'll find out together. The foundation was built for this, to help people like us, like our mothers. She squeezed Maria's fingers. You're not alone anymore. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, God. Thank you. Come on. Emily led her toward the party. Let me introduce you to my family. And tomorrow, we start looking for yours. They walked together toward the light and music. Behind them, the desert stretched endlessly, keeping fewer secrets than it once had. Richard and Grace danced, finally married, finally free. Evelyn laughed with Dr. Ramos. The foundation staff celebrated, a family built from ruins, thriving against all odds. And now, growing because Maria wasn't the last. Emily knew that now. Margaret Hale's cruelty had been thorough, methodical, spanning decades. But so would be their justice. Emily looked at her parents one more time, Richard dipping Grace theatrically, both of them laughing, and felt something shift in her chest. Not the pain of what was lost, but the strength of what remained. They couldn't change the past. The 26 stolen years would never come back, but they could make damn sure the future was different. For Maria, for whoever else was out there. Alone and searching, the Grace Bennett Foundation would find them all, under the Nevada stars, in the desert where it all began. Emily smiled. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, they were writing it together.